Donald Trump is a weak man pretending to be strong. He is a small man pretending to be big. He's a faithless man pretending to be righteous. He's a perpetrator who can't stop playing the victim.
Crying Adam Kinzinger. He's a super crying. I never saw the guy not crying. He's always crying. I looked at him. I remember years ago he was actually on my side. And then one day, you know, when you don't want to kill people in wars, they turn against you. Liz Cheney.
The cracks in the MAGA empire were no longer just whispers, they were glaring realities, and Adam Kinzinger didn't hold back in laying them out with pinpoint accuracy. He painted a stark picture of how even Trump's most steadfast allies were starting to break formation. The once ironclad endorsements that had guaranteed primary victories now seemed to be losing their magic touch. The Republican Party, which once marched in unison behind Trump, was beginning to show signs of divergence. More than a few members were quietly inching away from the movement, no longer certain that the former president's backing would secure their political futures. The once golden touch of Trump was beginning to look more like fool's gold, and Kinzinger was right there to connect the dots. But then came the moment that truly set social media ablaze. Without ever directly mentioning it, Kinzinger managed to hint at something that even Trump's most unwavering supporters had been avoiding: the state of his marriage. It was a subtle but piercing remark, enough to send speculation soaring. Yet despite the personal undertones, the real blow wasn't about Trump's private life, it was about his waning influence. There was a time when Trump's rallies were monumental, vibrant cultural events that pulsed with energy, attracting throngs of passionate supporters. But now, Kinzinger pointed out, the crowds were thinning, and the once fervent energy seemed to have dimmed. Footage that once showcased seas of red hats and roaring applause now revealed scattered crowds and a notable lack of the unyielding enthusiasm that had once defined Trump's political persona. And it wasn't just the rallies. The political landscape itself was shifting. High-profile Republicans who once treated Trump's endorsement as a golden ticket were now cautiously distancing themselves. The once unified narrative within the party was splintering. Some were quietly acknowledging that Trump's grasp on the party might finally be loosening. Yet, despite the evidence, die-hard loyalists continued to push back, labeling Kinzinger as a traitor and dismissing his analysis as wishful thinking. To them, the movement was still alive and well, but the cracks were visible, whether they chose to acknowledge them or not. Adding to the intrigue was a growing divide between the old guard and the new wave of Republicans, many of whom were now advocating for a fresh direction, one less centered on the controversial figure of Trump and more focused on policy and unity. Kinzinger's words were a wake-up call to those within the party who had remained silent, urging them to reconsider their unwavering allegiance. And then, the unexpected happened. A surprising endorsement of Kinzinger's views from a former Trump ally, who admitted that the party needed to evolve if it wanted to stay relevant. It wasn't just about the rallies or the slogans anymore. It was about moving forward, acknowledging past mistakes, and focusing on the future. As Kinzinger's words continued to ripple through political circles and media outlets, one question lingered: is the MAGA movement truly crumbling, or is this just a momentary setback? The answers remain uncertain, but one thing is clear: Kinzinger has sparked a conversation that won't be easily silenced. The once untouchable legacy of Trump is now being scrutinized, and the Republican Party finds itself at a crossroads. Will it cling to the past or chart a new course? Only time will tell, but the cracks in the empire are too evident to ignore. What do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for Trump's influence? Or is the movement just evolving into something new? Drop your thoughts below, because this story is far from over.
And as a military guy, I've always respected strength in leadership. And Trump is the opposite of that. He's a whiny, weak, small, tiny man who is scared to death.
Before we move on, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, because you definitely don't want to miss out on this one. Kinzinger wasn't just speaking, he was unloading years of pent-up frustration like a man who had finally reached his breaking point. It was as if a dam had burst and all the emotions he had been holding back came flooding out. He wasn't just recounting events, he was baring his soul, revealing the toll of witnessing political chaos firsthand. He had been in the eye of the storm, sitting through endless meetings, enduring the circus of partisan squabbles, and watching as rhetoric replaced reason. And now, with a sense of both exhaustion and determination, determination, he decided it was time to set the record straight. With that unmistakable mix of exasperation and clarity, Kinzinger meticulously laid out his thoughts piece by piece. His words weren't just for the interviewer, they were for the public. A warning, a wake-up call, and a public service announcement all rolled into one. It started like any other standard interview, calm, composed, and measured. But then, the atmosphere shifted. A seemingly straightforward question about Trump's lingering influence morphed into something far more explosive. Kinzinger didn't hold back. His voice grew sharper, his gaze more intense, and his words cut through the air like a knife. He talked about loyalty, how the concept had been twisted and manipulated to fit an agenda. He exposed the fear that gripped his colleagues, the fear of speaking out, of being labeled a traitor for daring to question the prevailing narrative. He described how the line between patriotism and blind allegiance had blurred, leaving behind a toxic political landscape where truth was sacrificed for convenience. Then, Kinzinger did something unexpected. He challenged those still supporting the chaos to rethink their stance. He urged them to ask themselves a simple question: are you fighting for your country or just defending a person? His tone was both pleading and commanding, as if hoping that his words would resonate beyond party lines. The room fell silent for a moment. Even the interviewer seemed taken aback by the raw honesty on display. Kinzinger had made his stand, not as a politician, but as a citizen who could no longer ignore the damage being done. As the interview wrapped up, the impact of his words lingered. This wasn't just another political commentary. It was a cathartic release, an emotional reckoning that left no doubt about where he stood. Kinzinger had drawn his line in the sand, knowing full well the backlash he would face. But instead of backing down, he leaned into the controversy, declaring that silence was no longer an option. He knew that speaking out would cost him allies, but he couldn't stand idly by while principles were eroded. And as the interview ended, one thought remained clear. Kinzinger had transformed from a frustrated insider to a relentless truth teller, unafraid of the consequences. The question now is whether his words will inspire others to find their voice, or whether his message will be drowned out by the noise. What do you think? Was Kinzinger's outburst a necessary wake-up call or an act of political desperation? Let us know in the comments, because this conversation is far from over.
What he's trying to distract from, because that's what all this is, always a distraction to try to get people's attention, or maybe he hasn't felt like he's got enough attention. But look, Jake, it's like, bring it on. Like, honestly, so, we had an election. I fought against Donald Trump. I wanted Kamala Harris to win. January 6th was a big thing, but America made a different choice. Fine, I'm ready to move on. I'm like, look, we made it very clear what happened on January.
Kinzinger leaned in, his voice laced with the conviction of someone who had tried to sound the alarm long before, but had been drowned out by the echo of slogans and unwavering loyalty. This time, he wasn't speaking in riddles or hinting at the truth. He was naming names, exposing flaws, and dragging skeletons out from Mar-a-Lago's opulent gold-plated closets. But what made this moment stand out from the usual political critiques? It wasn't just another speech dissecting policies or opposing legislation, because, let's face it, that's never been Trump's strong suit. Kinzinger wasn't merely challenging the former president's politics, he was challenging the very narrative that had shielded Trump from accountability. He laid bare the uncomfortable reality that many had either overlooked or refused to see. The problem, according to Kinzinger, wasn't just about policies, it was about character, leadership, and the dangerous precedent being set. With every pointed statement, it became clearer. This wasn't just an attack on Trump, it was an indictment of the culture that had allowed his influence to fester unchecked. Kinzinger's words cut through the political noise, forcing those watching to confront uncomfortable truths. He spoke of loyalty, misguided loyalty that had transformed into something more akin to submission. He spoke of fear, how those in power, who once claimed to be guided by conservative values, had surrendered their integrity at the altar of political convenience. But it didn't stop there. He addressed the aftermath, how the fallout from this blind allegiance had left the Republican Party fractured and disillusioned. Kinzinger warned that this wasn't just about Trump as a person, but about the lasting damage inflicted on American democracy. The real danger, he argued, was not just the man, but the myth, the unwavering belief in a leader who had long abandoned principles in favor of populist appeal. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Some looked on with admiration, others with disdain. Kinzinger knew his words would spark controversy, but that wasn't his concern. He had spent too long watching the party he once believed in again, become a hollow shell of its former self. Now, he was determined to confront it head on, no matter the cost. As his speech reached its crescendo, he didn't hold back. He called on fellow conservatives to reclaim their values, to challenge the rhetoric that had clouded judgment for far too long. It wasn't about erasing the past, but learning from it, recognizing mistakes, and vowing not to repeat them. The aftermath was swift and polarizing. Conservative media was quick to label Kinzinger a traitor, while others hailed him as a voice of reason in a landscape consumed by political theatrics. Trump himself couldn't resist responding, launching a tirade of insults and dismissing Kinzinger as irrelevant. But the damage had been done. For the first time in a long while, the conversation within the Republican Party began to shift, albeit slightly. Kinzinger's words sparked debates on social media and around dinner tables. Was it time to move on from Trump's brand of politics? Or was Kinzinger just another bitter voice among a sea of loyalists? One thing was clear, Kinzinger wasn't about to back down. He vowed to keep speaking up, challenging those who chose complacency over courage. Whether his words would lead to real change or fade into the noise of political warfare remained uncertain. But for now, he had done something many had feared to do. He had spoken the truth without reservation and let the chips fall where they may. And as the dust settled, one question lingered. Was this the beginning of a new era of accountability within the GOP? Or just another fleeting moment of dissent destined to be swept aside? Only talked about political disagreements or ideological clashes. No, this was about the man himself. The messy contradictions, the visible insecurities, the overwhelming need for validation, all wrapped up in a facade of toughness. Kinzinger didn't just critique Trump, he laid bare the complexities and flaws of a man who constantly demands to be feared and admired, yet fails to notice when he's crossing into self-parody. Kinzinger painted a picture so vivid it was impossible to dismiss. A man who, despite branding himself as a fearless leader, seemed consumed by the fear of losing relevance. His desire for dominance and unwavering loyalty appeared almost desperate. The more Kinzinger spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a political critique, it was an unflinching character study. Then came the personal jabs, subtle at first, almost like faint echoes, but growing louder and sharper with every word. Kinzinger highlighted the glaring inconsistencies in Trump's life. The way he presented himself as a financial genius while repeatedly leading his businesses into bankruptcy. It was a portrayal of a man who built an empire on the illusion of success, all while his ventures crumbled behind the scenes. And then there was the curious contrast of a man who claimed to be of the people, a populist icon who supposedly understood the struggles of everyday Americans. Yet, in reality, it seemed unlikely that Trump had even glanced at a fast food dollar menu in decades, let alone experienced the challenges faced by those who relied on it. Kinzinger didn't hold back from pointing out the irony of a leader who championed the working class but remained far removed from their reality. But Kinzinger didn't just focus on the inconsistencies, he also touched on the persona Trump crafted over the years. The ultimate deal maker, the unshakable winner. Yet, the truth revealed a man often chasing fleeting victories, never satisfied, perpetually in pursuit of validation from the very elites he claimed to despise. Kinzinger questioned whether Trump's entire narrative was less about making America great and more about making Trump feel great. The speech took on a deeper tone as Kinzinger ventured into Trump's need for constant praise, how a single criticism could send him spiraling into defensive tirades, lashing out at anyone who dared challenge his perception of himself. It wasn't just about leadership, it was about ego, a fragile one at that, and as Kinzinger's words resonated, a question hung in the air. Could the man who demanded unwavering loyalty truly understand the value of genuine respect? Was Trump's fierce insistence on admiration a reflection of inner confidence? Or was it masking a profound insecurity, a fear that without the applause, there might be nothing left but an ordinary man with ordinary flaws? The speech took on a deeper tone as Kinzinger ventured into Trump's need for constant praise, how a single criticism could send him spiraling into defensive tirades, lashing out at anyone who dared challenge his perception of himself. It wasn't just about leadership, it was about ego, a fragile one at that, and as Kinzinger's words resonated, a question hung in the air. Could the man who demanded unwavering loyalty truly understand the value of genuine respect? Was Trump's fierce insistence on admiration a reflection of inner confidence? performance? Or was it masking a profound insecurity, a fear that without the applause, there might be nothing left but an ordinary man with ordinary flaws? The impact of Kinzinger's speech was undeniable. It wasn't just a political statement, it was a wake-up call, urging people to look beyond the bravado and see the human complexities of a leader who once seemed larger than life. And as the echoes of his words faded, the nation found itself at a crossroads. Should they continue to embrace the myth or confront the reality of a man who might be more vulnerable than anyone had imagined? In the days that followed, the fallout was both fierce and divided. Supporters doubled down on their allegiance, dismissing Kinzinger's words as mere political theater. Detractors, however, found validation in the speech, claiming it confirmed their long-held suspicions about Trump's character. But one thing was clear: Kinzinger had forced a conversation, a difficult, uncomfortable conversation about leadership, identity, and the sometimes blurry line between strength and insecurity. And whether people agreed or not, they couldn't help but think about the man behind the persona. As debates raged on, Kinzinger's words remained etched in the political landscape, a bold, unfiltered critique that challenged not just Trump, but the very way people perceive power and authenticity. What do you think? Was Kinzinger's portrayal fair, or did it go too far? Drop your thoughts below, because this conversation is far from over.
We've all had a few days to reflect on Trump's victory. I'm just curious now on this Sunday night how you see his return to power shaping this country's future.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a resounding victory, and I think, to some extent, that's actually a good thing, because now they're going to have an opportunity to put their vision in place. I mean, we've been talking about what is, Trump's vision for years now, and they're going to have to own whatever that is. This idea of massive tariffs, well, we may actually see what massive tariffs do, mass deportation.
Kinzinger didn't just claim that Trump was out of touch, he practically handed him a map and compass, challenging him to find his way back to reality. The statement hung in the air, heavy with a mix of defiance and revelation, leaving the audience on the edge of their seats. Then came the moment that made everyone lean in closer, eyes widening as they sensed something big was coming. Kinzinger wasn't just dabbling in politics anymore. He took a bold leap straight into Trump's personal world, peeling back the layers of the carefully constructed reality TV persona that had captivated millions. But Kinzinger didn't resort to wild accusations or unfounded claims. No, his strategy was far more precise. He didn't need to invent stories or twist narratives. Instead, he pointed to the glaring truths that had been in plain sight all along, truths that many knew but rarely dared to say out loud. It wasn't just about Trump's policies or his time in office. Kinzinger went deeper, challenging the very image Trump had cultivated over decades, a persona built on success, power, and unwavering control. He exposed the contrast between Trump's public bravado and the increasingly chaotic, disconnected reality that seemed to follow him after his political fall from grace. As Kinzinger spoke, he wasn't just critiquing a political figure, he was dissecting a phenomenon. The crowd could feel it. This wasn't just another speech, it was a reality check aimed directly at the core of Trump's influence. Kinzinger emphasized how Trump's insistence on reliving past victories and refusing to acknowledge defeat had morphed into a pattern that was not just politically damaging, but personally self-destructive. He called out how Trump's circle had grown smaller, populated by loyalists unwilling to challenge his version of reality. He highlighted the alienation of once close allies, who had either distanced themselves or been publicly condemned for speaking the uncomfortable truth. Kinzinger's words painted a picture of a leader caught in a feedback loop of his own making, one that was pushing him further from the very people he claimed to represent. The real blow, however, came when Kinzinger questioned the legacy Trump was building. Was it one of lasting political influence or a cautionary tale of power unchecked by reason? Kinzinger didn't pretend to have all the answers, but he made one thing clear: clinging to a past that no longer exists is not leadership, it's delusion. And then, just when it seemed like Kinzinger had said it all, he dropped one final thought, a challenge, not just to Trump, but to those who still stood unwaveringly by his side. It's time to stop living in a fantasy, he declared. The future of the party and the country depends on facing reality, not bending it to fit a single man's narrative. The crowd remained silent, digesting his words. Some nodded in agreement, while others remained guarded, unsure whether to cheer or criticize. One thing was undeniable: Kinzinger had just delivered a verbal gut punch that would resonate well beyond the room, leaving both supporters and critics to grapple with the uncomfortable truth. And as the dust settled, a bigger question emerged. Was this the moment that would finally force a reckoning within Trump's inner circle? circle? Or would his base double down, refusing to entertain the possibility that their leader was indeed out of touch? One thing's for sure, Kinzinger didn't just make a statement, he sparked a conversation that won't be ending anytime soon. So where does this leave Trump, and more importantly, the movement that rallied around him? The next few weeks will tell if this bold confrontation will lead to real change, or simply add fuel to an already blazing fire. What do you think? Was Kinzinger right to call out Trump, or did he go too far? Share your thoughts below, because this debate is far from over.
Something I thought was fascinating. I think we have that here. This is last year you wrote about Donald Trump. I'm genuinely surprised how people close to Trump haven't talked about the odor. It's truly something to behold. Wear a mask if you can. Now,
I mean,
what did it smell like specifically?
so if you take like armpits, ketchup, makeup, and a little butt, it's probably like that all mixed up.
And that's
yeah.
That's the Trump
A
formula?
little bit of a pungent odor, I would say, yeah. You definitely wouldn't want to bottle it up and wear Trump cologne.